Getting ready to go live.
So I don't know that my brother make it will be okay.
Oh no, she doesn't.
His legacy will live on.
I'm here.
Right here.
How are you?
Oh my God.
It's fine, whatever it is, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. It's October 6th, time for regular scheduled Frank Fair School Board meeting. This page, we have a roll call.
Mr. Dancy,
Here.
Mr. McGuire,
Here.
Mr. Benefield,
Here.
Mr. Garner, Mr. Harris,
Present.
Mr. Guidro,
Here.
Ms. Willis, Ms. Broadway,
Here.
Ms. McGaskey, here, Ms. Palmer, Ms. Bell.
Thank you, ma'am. Board members, it's been requested numerous times, and we're going to try it again. Please pull your microphone directly into your face and talk, because the public cannot hear the comments being made. Please speak directly into the microphone with a firm voice. Anyone that would like to speak to an agenda item, please secure the form in the back of the room and pass it to the front. Members of the public and board members, please turn your cell phone to silent. That's not to disrupt the meeting. Superintendent Eloy, your report, sir?
Yes, sir. So it is the beginning of October, and I started here April 20th. So in a few days, it'll be the mark of my 6 months here in this position. So I thought it was a good time to kind of recap where we started and where we are currently. So some items I wanted to remind you of before I get into some COVID-related business is we are now one-to-one on devices. We have hired a new business manager who will be talking to you later, who's doing a great job. We've hired an excellent new food service manager, which I'll highlight something that she's brought to the district here recently that's really exciting. We have hired and placed an amazing cohort of principals, which are in attendance tonight, and we have a great team. We have navigated the start of school during COVID-19, a global pandemic, and we are seeing that our procedures and protocols are working, and I'll share that with you in a minute when we discuss COVID. We created an entirely new school with a different delivery method in the span of only 2.5 months, and that's our virtual school, and that's largely due to the folks on curriculum and also Ms. Felicia Pinckney. We navigated the worst hurricane in the recent history of Natchitoches and the state of Louisiana. We hired a communication manager and have seen our communications with stakeholders vastly improve, including, as I hope many of you saw, our recent district newsletter, which I just thought was so great and encompasses really, in general, what we've been doing with communication. And we also have thousands of people on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as far as how we get all of our communication out. We are also working hard to reduce our uncertified teacher population. That said, I do want to frame this in another context that 90% of our uncertified teachers do have a bachelor's degree, and also 3 of them have a master's degree. And many of them, I've been speaking with them this week, and they are in the process of finalizing their certifications or are in the process of doing that. We're also discussing with Mr. Wascom the need to analyze our budget, whether that's in the form of an audit through a third party or the group that we're already engaged with. But we do feel it's necessary to make sure that the folks in the district, the stakeholders, the board, the parents understand everything they need to about the budget, and that we are being transparent about that. We've reviewed all of our internal, I'm so sorry, don't listen to my own advice. We have reviewed all internal policy, or I'm sorry, we're reviewing all internal policy. We've already gone through the first chapter of our CAPS policy to ensure that our policies are up to date, accurate, and appropriate. We found some policies today from the mid-90s that definitely need to be updated. So we're in the process of that, and we should finish that process within the calendar year. We have also started the Cultural Diversity Committee, which I will update you about, and Ms. Rachel will as well, that I know was a big part of my initial hiring. We have also been moving the district into the 21st century through different software and policies, specifically addressing individual concerns that teachers and staff have regarding payroll and certification issues. And what we've found is we're doing what we're supposed to, but we have some systemic issues, some structural issues that really make that process just difficult to do consistently. And so we're getting some help to those two entities to improve our processes and basically improve how we roll out things to our teachers and staff and make sure that they have a consistency when it comes to their payroll and their deductions and things of that nature. We are also in conversations and have entered into initial agreements with NSU and CLTCC in regards to our associate's degree with both those programs, and those are going to radically change the opportunities that students can get here in Natchitoches Parish. And that's all been done in less than 6 months, and I don't say that to pat myself on the back. That's been an effort of all these fine folks in the room, and I'm just blessed to be a part of it. And then finally, I would say, and this is anecdotal, we don't necessarily have any data on this, but I can tell you, and I think you can ask some of these fine folks in here, that culturally, our system is on the move. We are improving the morale, the culture, and just in general, how we do school in this district. So I'm excited about that. So moving on from this previous 6 months, I'd like to talk to you about our strategic plan. We, when I initially came on, we talked about the first 90 days. Unfortunately, COVID got involved and Hurricane Laura got involved, and so we had to kind of put that on the back burner. But we are now at a point, because we are consistent in how we're addressing COVID, and we're past Laura, thank goodness, although we do know we have another storm in the Gulf, and I'll discuss that in a minute. It's time that we can turn our attention back to strategic planning. So on October 17th and November 7th, we will be meeting on a Saturday with a lot of stakeholders, including our principals and our district staff, and we will be really investigating our strategic plan. Specifically, we're focused on 3 different pieces of research, 3 different researchers. That's Charlotte Danielson. She is the author of The 9 Characteristics of Successful Districts. That's a peer-reviewed, commonly cited paper that she put out, and she's actually reviewed that, and we now have a follow-up to that. So we're looking at what she says. We're also looking at the Reeves study of the 90-90-90 schools. Those are 90% high poverty, 90% minority schools, but 90% mastery of skills, whether it be on math or ELA. So we're looking at their research as a catalyst for how we should turn this district around and make it an A district. Just to give you an idea, John Hattie's research is also his meta-analysis of effect sizes for common school practices. So basically what he tells you is, he talks about all of this stuff that we do in schools, whether it's homework or recess, and he says, does it work or does it not work? So, and I'm telling you this, some of it probably doesn't matter, but I'm telling you this because we are going to be a data-centered district, and we are going to be a research-centered district. We're not going to do things on whims because we think they may work. We're going to do them because we've seen them work in other places. So we're very excited about that. Now onto the COVID update. We have had a lot of changes in the COVID world. The folks in this room sat in a meeting for about 6 hours, 2 of which were devoted only to new changes in regards to COVID with the Office of Public Health. I also put out a Magnolia Minute today, and I'd like to go into some of that information. What we are telling everyone is we are having a lot of quarantines, but I need everyone to understand that quarantines are good. Now, are they convenient? No, but COVID's really inconvenient. Quarantines happen, and they don't just happen because of exposure to a positive case. They can happen because of exposure. They can also happen because of symptoms. They can also happen because someone's waiting for a test, or perhaps someone in their household is waiting for a test. It really is contextual to the situation. I know there's families out there, parents out there who see, they get a letter. I was one of them. You get a letter and you say, oh my goodness, COVID's at my child's school. If you get a letter saying that your child is quarantined, that is out of an abundance of caution. It does not mean COVID's at your school. We've also updated what you can be quarantined for. The recent data from the Office of Public Health is telling us that if a student comes to school with one major symptom, and a major symptom is coughing, and that's not just, you clearing your throat, that's a major persistent cough, shortness of breath, and then, again, that's not, you ran a mile and then you have shortness of breath, that's to be expected. And then the third one is loss of taste or smell. If you have any of those three symptoms, you have to immediately quarantine. Your close contacts have to immediately quarantine. What is a close contact? A close contact is anyone who is around you within 6 feet for an accumulation of 15 minutes or more. What if I have a mask on? Masks are great. We still are encouraging masks. We are still mandating masks for third and above. It does not get you from quarantine. It prevents you from possibly getting the disease or the virus, but it does not prevent you from ultimately having a quarantine. Again, these are public health guidelines. These are not NACADIS. These are not Grant Eloy guidelines. We are getting these from the expert. So if you quarantine in this situation because of symptoms, you can do one of two things. You can go home and quarantine for 14 days, or you can go get a COVID test, but you have to be careful. Many people right now are getting rapid tests. Although the rapid tests are out there, Office of Public Health will not allow for a rapid test to get you out of a symptom-related quarantine. You have to have the PCR non-rapid test. The reason for that is that the rapid tests are having too many false negatives to be reliable. If you get a positive from a rapid test, that is reliable. They're not getting false positives, they're getting false negatives. If you get a negative test, you would have had to quarantine until you got that test, but that would count as an alternative diagnosis. The other option to do is you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you an alternative diagnosis. For instance, you purchased a new that would count as an alternative diagnosis. The other option to do is you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you an alternative diagnosis. For instance, you purchased a new family pet and you wake up the next morning, you're sneezing, you have congestion, all those things. You should go to your doctor because those are also COVID-related symptoms, but when talking to them, they say, you got a new cat, you have allergies, we know that. If the doctor gives you an alternative diagnosis, then that does count. That has to be in writing, and it cannot be from anyone except for your medical doctor. Now, that does, to some people, contradict something we've said before, which is that you cannot test out of a quarantine. That is still true. You cannot test out of a quarantine due to an exposure to a known positive. If someone in this room, perhaps someone on this board, I won't speak that evil on them, knock on wood, but if they were to test positive and I had exposure to them, I could get a COVID test every day of my 14-day quarantine and it would still not exit me from the quarantine. We have laid this out to folks. But what's going to happen is a few things. I've told this to board members already. We're going to have people who believe that we are contradicting things because it is very complicated. We had all of our principals who are master's level professionals sit in a meeting for 2 hours, and it is difficult to ascertain because so much of the information is so granular. And so we know we can put this out a lot, but people are still going to at times be confused. We encourage you to call us. Ms. Page wants you to call. Even if you're mad, call Ms. Page and she can talk it through and she is doing an amazing job of it. The other folks you can call is Office of Public Health, and we are more than willing. We put many parents in touch with them. They can answer your questions. You can call them mad as well, and they can put you at ease because there is a frustration here, and we recognize that. We also want you to realize that some people are going to feel that we are withholding information and not being transparent. There are certain things we will never be able to share because of HIPAA. But in an effort to show that we are being transparent tonight, I would like to share with you some information that I think actually shows how well we are doing. And that is, since August 24th, we have had 8 school board employees test positive. Now, let me just preempt that by saying none of these employees were exposed at school. This was through community spread, and Office of Public Health recognizes that, and because they do their contact tracing. Also, we were able to quarantine those folks before that they were able to spread the virus to anyone else, including students. This is occurring outside of school, after hours, whether it be at parties, get-togethers, etc. So we had 8 adults. We have had 9 students. Of those 9 students, 6 of those students were from the same 3 families. They quarantined. They prevented it from going to anyone else, and they also did not catch it again from school spread. It was from community spread. We told you 2 months ago we would have cases. Every school district in the state has cases. It's how good your policies are to prevent the spread of those cases that show if you're doing the work. We want to be transparent. We will not be able to share any identifiable information about those cases, whether it's what school they're at, what classroom they're in, who their teacher is, what their sex, race, etc. Because just like everyone in this room, and myself included, have a right to privacy, so do these individuals, and they did nothing wrong. They simply caught a virus, which we have all in our lifetimes done. So, again, be flexible, be understanding, and realize that we will be updating the board on a monthly basis about what's going on with COVID, and we will be as transparent as we are allowed to be. The other thing I'll tell you is we also have this new system called the Red Cap system. It's through LDH, where the principals are reporting all of their positive cases and their exposures to positive cases, positive cases in symptomatic students. They are putting in there, and then they're also putting in data that LDH is able to track these situations. I will be getting a weekly report, which I will compile to create a monthly report that I will be sharing with you. So this is coming from the schools individually. On some lighter notes, lab students who are currently not allowed to partake in the district-wide Title I free lunch policy until December 31st received news today that they will be also able to eat for free district-wide. So every student until December 31st, and then all schools with the exception of the lab schools after December 31st will be able to eat for free. And that comes from Ms. Hicks, and she did that, she really investigated that herself. She also, I wanted to note, received a $10,000 grant today, and she has made it past the second round of her $25,000 grant with Weyerhaeuser. And on another happy note with food service, if you remember, we lost $96,000 in food due to Hurricane Laura. She is now able to recoup that. She did that with Mr. Wascom, and I hope I'm not stealing his thunder. She is recouping $86,000 of that loss because all we're having to pay is our $10,000 deductible. So that was very exciting. Yes, that deserves a hand clap. So all in all, the state of our union, if you want to put it that way, is we're dealing with COVID. It's not fun. It's not great. But the proudest moment I had over the past 2 weeks was when I was talking to Dr. Martha White, and many of the principals can tell you she's a very serious character. She's been dealing with this, and she's at the height of her field. And she told Miss Page, I was in the room with her, she said, every district is dealing with this, we're seeing this, but I can tell you, and she doesn't have to tell us this, Natchitoches Parish is doing an outstanding job. And I can tell you she's very serious, she does not give compliments easily, and I really think that's a testament to our principals. And I would say first and foremost in the COVID world, and she hates when I do this, but Miss Page has been dealing with this on weekends. We've had principals in Miss Page having to go to students' houses on Saturdays and Sundays to deliver this information because it can't sit even for an hour. So, all that fun news, and that is my superintendent. That is my superintendent's report, but yes, go Miss Page.
Thank you, Ms. Page, also Superintendent, thank you for that great report. Good news, and you know, there's another element that goes along with that, and that's the willingness with all of our students and teachers and staff to actually participate and speak up when something does happen and acknowledge the fact that there is a quarantine situation, especially in their family. So that element also has to be recognized. Board members, any old business?
I have some old business real quick. It was something to respond to Mr. McGuire about. Last board meeting, you asked about the bus parking lot, and I reached out to Hammonds and Seals to get an update on that. Charles Hardy is the associate dealing with it with us, and he is actively, he's sent a letter to the other party, and he's trying to reach some sort of middle ground, but we're waiting to hear from them on if they are willing to even do anything as far as middle ground goes. So that's where we're at currently.
Ms. Eloy, I wanted to ask, all of that information that you gave us pertaining to COVID and them having to be in quarantine and all that, is it been sent out to the parents, to the, different households in general?
Yes,
so
ma'am.
people will have a better understanding?
So we've done the Magnolia Minute. We've also done we posted it on all our social media accounts, but I do believe that some of the schools have already sent out, there's like a one-sheeter that I know that we have provided them, and actually I think that was one of our principals, Mr. Cody, who originally came up with that, and then we modified it for district use that informs the parents. So if they haven't gotten it already, they will be getting it, and it's a one-pager that in as simple terms as possible, because it is a ton of information, tells them what they need to do. Now, the easiest bit of information I can tell anyone, and this is students and staff included, short of all that minutia that's kind of extra, is if you are not feeling well, do not come to school. Because the deal is if you get in that classroom and you spend 15 minutes in there and you have what we would typically term a cold, every student in that class is going to be quarantined until you either get an alternative diagnosis, a negative test, or you just run out your quarantine. So that's what we're trying to tell everyone, and I think a lot of the schools are doing a really good job of catching students as they come in, but the first line of defense really needs to be those parents to say, if your child is not 100%, if they are one of those major or two of the minor, they don't need to stay home. I mean, they need to stay home. The other part of it is, one of those, for instance, one of those minor symptoms, and this again is counterintuitive to all of our brains, fever is considered a minor symptom. That's for COVID. If your child has a fever, please do not get into the granular nature of this and say, oh, well, they only have one minor symptom and send them to school. If they have fever, that's a major symptom for a whole lot of other things. Because we are still in the business of combating flu, strep, which has gotten, I think strep is making its way around the parish. So we are asking you to, in years past, you might have sent your child with a mild fever. Probably shouldn't have, but I think a lot of folks have done that. This year, if you have to question it at all, if there's any doubt in your mind, should I send my child to school? Do not send them to school. Which brings up another point about attendance. We are giving grace, especially when it's related to COVID. We are working, all these principals in here know, we are working with families. You are not going to be penalized for COVID-related absences. They will be excused regardless, but we will work with families to ensure that students are not penalized for COVID-related absences. So, I'm sorry, that was a lot more than you asked for.
That's all right. Let me ask one more question. In reference to the total number of cases in all of the parish schools, can we get an ongoing update?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
On a monthly, if y'all would like, I sent out that Monday email. I'm waiting, because this red cap system is somewhat new, and it actually is only for the principals. We have some access to it, but they're actually submitting on a daily basis when they have cases, and then it goes to the state. We do have the ability for me to get a weekly report. I have not received my weekly reports yet. As soon as I find out if that's going to be on a Thursday, Friday, or whatever it is, I have no problem informing the board of that report.
Thank you.
Reverend Harris, you got something? Okay. Under old business also, we have a retreat of training, actually September 19th down at Pineville High School. The training, I think the board members that attend can all agree, the training was good, very good, in fact, excellent. It concentrated on how to deal with an issue and service the people that approach us with an issue. Also talked about board responsibility, superintendent responsibility. We had quite a few people that were very active in questions and answers, and it worked out very well. The training was provided by Dr. Janet Pope of the Louisiana School Board Association, and so it was really, really good. Those board members that could not attend, I have placed a packet of what the items that we covered on your desk. And any new business? Okay. Mr. Cozad, do we have any comments from the public?
No, sir.
Thank you. This time I'd like for us to examine the consent agenda. Any questions about the consent agenda? Mr. Danzig, can you offer your report, sir?
Absolutely will. Item one, number one, take appropriate action on bids. We have no bids this time. Item number two, city transportation report. Mr. Matthews here. He doesn't get- Oh, there he is.
Hiding out.
Hello, how's everyone doing?
The microphone, so we can pick it up.
Good afternoon, how's everybody doing? For transportation, we don't have anything new that's big right now. One of the most important things for us right now is continuing to hire drivers. We have some issues at the high school concerning one route. As soon as we get someone hired on to have that route taken care of, that issue will be resolved, and we won't have any outstanding issues with any of the schools as far as routes and route timing. That's planned. That's planned out right now. Of course, there'll be hiccups, that we face on when it arrives. But as far as anything that we know of that's planned to be late or planned to be an issue, as soon as we get that driver in, it'll be fixed. We have 3 drivers right now that we're training that's received their permit. Within the next week or 2, they should have received their license, and we'll have that situation resolved. Any questions, anybody?
Are you still maintaining your incentive program for recruitment?
Yes, sir.
That's great. And
Yes,
is that bringing in those new drivers?
Well, actually, all the new recruits that we have right now, we have about 14 of them. They're all monitors that decided they wanted to step up and become drivers.
That's great.
So right now, we don't have anyone outside of the company. We recruited our monitors. They're already on that schedule. They're already coming to work every day, and we offered it out, and 14 of them took that offer.
How did the firemen and those type of positions work out?
Firemen?
Prior to you, they were going to approach the city firemen and the fire districts to see if there was someone in the districts and in the city that would like to drive a bus part-time on a rotation.
I would treat that the same way we treat the teachers and the
What I'm
coaches
saying,
that
was
drive.
it successful, or is it still ongoing, or are you not
This is
aware
my
of
first time hearing of it.
it? So I guess it's got to feel like
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, but I mean,
Question
I'd
answered.
like to thank the teachers and the coaches that drive routes in the morning and go into the school and teach, and then come back and drive another route. But for those firemen or any other service members that would, want to do that, we certainly welcome.
I have a quick question. What is your protocol when a bus driver does not show up for work?
So we definitely have a disciplinary action. We do a verbal warning that's written. From there, if it happens again, it's a suspension, and then we move to termination, but it has to have it has to be a process. Unfortunately, we had an incident like that, and we have since moved with the plan of action to document those situations and move forward. it's coaching, pretty much. Trying to find out the reason why, what happened.
Do you have a protocol to contact parents who are on the route whose children may not be picked up that morning, or?
We haven't had a situation in the morning, but we do have all of the parent phone numbers. Right now, we've brought in extra bodies in the office to man the phones. So yes, if that was to happen in the morning, we definitely have the manpower to make those calls. Yes, ma'am.
And I think the other thing that Mr. Matthews has brought on since being hired is he has a text message with all the principals where he sends them anything that like that occurs. He can get the information to them as well, so they can also, in some way, sometimes they're able to help communicate those things to parents.
Another thing that we have in plan for something like that, we can deploy drivers to get to those stops, and the delay will probably be between 5 and 10 minutes. So it shouldn't be a situation to where those kids are outside for hours in the mornings. We can definitely have a driver, depending on the area. The further out areas are kind of more difficult, but anything that's close in the city, we could definitely have either a driver leave the office and go get a bus. We're now blessed to have about 5 spare buses every day. So we can have myself or someone in the office get in the bus and go and pick up those kids, or have drivers on their routes that's in the area, pick those kids up to keep that time down to about 5 to 10 minutes.
How large is your bench now?
Our bench right now is 3, but that's what's so important about converting those monitors into drivers. I have 13. When all 13 of those become certified, we'll have 16 on bench.
Is it working out better with the new route situation?
I'd really love for the principals to answer that question, but from the feedback that I'm getting, yes, ma'am.
So we have all our principals here, Ms. McGaskey. If you would like to ask one of them, any of our principals in the city schools specifically, Mr. Cody, I see you right there. Would you like to come up to the microphone and speak to how it's?
Sure.
Not to put you on the spot.
Never, that's okay. It's much improved. We went from 21 buses that came to Vaughn last year to we have only about 14 that come through by 3:30. We only have 2 buses that remain. He knows exactly what 2 buses those are. And that's his drivers that he's trying to get certified are going to be those two riders. So last year, we still would have had probably 50 or 60 kids past 3:30. Now we only have 14 kids past 3:30. So that's much, much improved.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Item number 3, tax commission report, Mr. Watson.
I went to my first tax commission meeting a couple weeks back. Actually have a lot of good, encouraging news there. Sales tax collections are actually up everywhere as an average. By industry, they're up significantly at Walmart, hardware stores, car sales, furniture stores. Significant increases, like record-breaking in those areas. Restaurants, several of the mom and pop shops are suffering. If you have a restaurant with a drive-through, you're doing well. If you don't have a drive-through, it's tough to deal with. But overall, it seems like that our parish went home during our time, in some cases, and they decided to start working around the house and buy new cars. And so the nervousness, I'm sure, was in this board that we would not be collecting sales taxes. We actually are exceeding last year. So if y'all want to go to the last four pages of your report, specifically to us, this is just the next fair school board's date. You can see 2020 exceeds 2019 on every page. Somewhere between 12 to 20%. I think one's 23% increase in certain categories. This is really good for budgeting purposes later. So So I will probably be coming back to you guys in reviewing budget. This will be a more than a 5% movement in your budget as far as revenue collected, and I will get back to y'all, I'm hoping by next meeting, to make budget adjustments based on these numbers. If they, I might ask Jerry if he seems to think this will be sustained. But we can make some adjustments based on the information we have here. Any other questions? I didn't know if y'all had time on that particular piece.
Always got time for good news.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I've actually got a good bit of good news. Did you want me to do the rest of my budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay, in your budget, it has the yellow line in it. I added a new column for you. I find it helpful. So column number 2 is the actual as of the same moment last year. Y'all know what I mean?
Yes.
So you can compare, just sit there and look at your yearly budget and year to date. It's kind of useless because you don't know where you compare to the same moment last year. So column 2 is your actual as of September 30, 2019. Column 3 is your actual as of 2020, okay? So that tells you that your collections in the general fund revenue are up. The child nutrition is down. I think that's issues with timing. I think those checks are coming in early October. I think that will balance itself out, as well as Title I here. Same way. That often has to do with our timing and asking for reimbursement. Okay? Any questions on that? Well,
Good information, Mr. Warren. We can now compare something.
yes, I think that's a helpful thing, because I need to know from y'all if y'all need any other things that would make your budget more understandable. Because accountants talk accountant language. We have our own acronyms, and it's hard to understand. So if y'all can say, can you prepare a budget for this particular area? I would like, do you want to see a budget that shows where all the BRE funds are and exactly what's going on? Well, I can actually show you that as well. I actually have that with me. But I'll be glad to prepare whatever y'all would make y'all, help be helpful for y'all to make good decisions.
The BRE would be really helpful, not, well, it would be helpful if you could.
If you would like me to add it to that budget,
Or something like that.
I'll be able to, now it's gonna be broken down into like, this is one budget for these 3 schools and one for Marthaville, one, yeah.
One of the things we talked about during the retreat was having the principals all come in and have a BRE 101.
That's right.
I would be glad to provide that.
When can you schedule that, sir? I'm sure tomorrow would be just
Actually, well, Billy, if you want to talk, certainly before our next board meeting, I certainly can provide time after I'd say sometime in the next 2 weeks or so, we can start doing that. Now, did you want to do this as a board meeting, or did you want to do this as just 3 at a
This will be
time?
coordinated by the superintendent. I would just.
Certainly.
Yeah, just some professional development in regards to BRE for, which we've spoken about anecdotally.
Certainly. Okay. Went over, I got here and we had just sustained the worst damage, weather event that the parish has probably had on record. We had sustained winds of 112 miles an hour at all of our locations. And it did not decline from Natchitoches as it made its way to Goldana. It still was sustained heavy winds. It seemed like just north of us, though, it stopped. It seemed like it just stalled on top of Natchitoches and stayed here. We have 12 campuses. We have one that's been abandoned in Clutcheville. We have noticed damage in Clutcheville. We can do nothing about it. All we have is liability. Okay, about that one. The other ones have, well, I have a summary, but we have occupancy of all of our buildings, and to a normal layman looking at our buildings, it doesn't look like but like little pieces of metal that have been torn off. But like Natchitoches Junior High, the dome was rocked, and holes that were this big and leaking kind of are now this big and leaking a good bit, and creating some damage here and there. So I would like to, I did not get the call from the attorney, Mr. Eli?
Yeah, so what Mr. Walson's referring to is, due to it being an emergency, public bid laws can be circumvented because it's an emergency and the timeliness is a factor in this. We have talked to Hemmings and Seals and they have agreed that we can do this, so what we're waiting for from them is a resolution that y'all can vote on allowing us to declare that emergency, so Mr. Walson can, not have to put all those out for bid.
Because otherwise I would have to go get engineers, go figure it all out. It's every single campus, multiple buildings, multiple areas of damage. It's not like just let's build new buildings at Natchez Central like we're doing now. It is every single campus has damage and some fairly significant. So I will tell you this, that whatever money we have available is going to be focused on securing, in facilities preservation, which is a part of my job. I'm going to focus on moisture penetration and life safety issues. So if you have a building that has no leaks, it can last 300 years. If it has 3 or 4 major leaks, then I give you 20. It's that significant. Water is the most destructive force. It creates mold. Mold gets an AC system, so pretty soon you have to abate the mold, and you have that. So I'm gonna focus monetary decision making on securing our leaks, which I know every principal in here can tell y'all have leaks. And a lot of this was like a simple Goldana. They have 4 brand new AC systems, but they're whole systems of these big tall things on top of this building, and they were rocking at 100, being pushed around. Water got in there, no permanent damage, but we have to get up there and seal and dap this leak, so some of the roofing has come apart. There are some leaks that were hurricane only, and there are leaks that have shown up since hurricane to hurricane. I've got a bid to fix everything. It exceeds $1 million. But there are some campuses that maybe $20,000, $30,000 to fix leaks, and there's another that, so I will get back to you. I have to prioritize these because I'm not convinced that we can afford that immediately. I will say this, we are applying to FEMA, public assistance, and we will get as much as we can from there. I also toured the entire campuses with our insurance company. I don't know if y'all know this, but how our insurance works is if you take, for instance, maybe Natchez Central, I think they're $68 million in Natchez Central. Their buildings are worth $43 million. You take 1% of that, that means that our deductible on that location, all buildings included, is $430,000. So if y'all see how that is, I have to get $431,000 worth of damage just at that one location to get any money from the insurance company. However, they did mention about the issue of this food spoilage, and I said, oh yeah, well we happen to have $96,000 for the food spoilage. So that check actually should be in shortly to Shauna's. That reimburses to Shauna's food service. That's not general funds there. So so anyhow, it's an interesting first few weeks to go tour all our facilities. I will say it was a great way to assess the condition all our building and facilities are in and what takes priority. So if y'all are all in agreement, I will continue with this priority of moisture penetration and life safety issues. So let's talk about life safety issues. Mr. Cody has a piece of limb on the bus shed that has penetrated the bus shed, and we need to remove all that so that it doesn't continue to fall through if somebody's there. That's something that needs immediate, urgent thing. We had sent somebody out there that it was just overlooked. So but things like that will be where we take our priority. So I do, the maintenance report that was provided is a maintenance of non-hurricane issues, okay? But I do have a list of all the hurricane issues, and it's being finalized with the insurance adjuster. So if y'all would like to take a look of what damage was received at each of the campuses as I see it, and as the adjuster sees it, I'll be glad to provide that to y'all, okay? So I would like to ask the board if we could pass emergency matters, if you can understand if I had to get an engineer at each one of these campuses, then go out for bid, we wouldn't be fixing these problems until May. I mean, that's being,
So Hammonds and Seals will have that resolution before the Thursday meeting? And
I certainly hope, I was hoping to get it here to you to present today.
And assuming y'all will allow for that to be added to the agenda,
We can. Again, that's housekeeping for items that have to be done and things like this can be done without any issue.
Okay.
But, and we actually discussed it in this meeting,
We did.
Now, y'all all understand that FEMA, if they do pay us, hopefully reimburse us for everything, waiting on FEMA money. So the BRE funds are gonna be strained until recovered.
I understand.
Okay. So, all right, is there anything else?
Not the greatest information, but I think we can agree it's nice to be informed.
Yes. Amen. All right,
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
okay.
Maintenance report, we just got to keep talking about it. Is there any questions on the list, that he referred to as far as the list of maintenance items that were performed? Number 6, we're gonna defer that to Thursday night. Number 7, consider approving the Louisiana Workforce Commission Social Services contract. Ms. Bennett? Yeah,
If you remember, last year about this time, I came to you and asked you to put out about 21.3% matching money to do a transition third-party agreement with Louisiana Workforce Commission that enabled us to partner with Louisiana Rehab Services for our transition students at the high school to get into some job training. And we were successful last year. We ended up hiring 2 transition specialists to work the community and got jobs for our students and served as job coaches. And we even worked through Covet, which none of the other parishes in the state were able to do. We found ways to continue to work through Covet and provide transition through Zoom lessons and a lot of other things. And so as a result of that, they allowed us to apply for the grant for 3 years instead of 1 year. So that's what I have before you right now is the grant. You have the contract, which is the first thing in your folder. And then you actually have Exhibit A, which is a summary, which has the job descriptions in it. And then Exhibit B is actually your budget, and that's probably what you're interested in. And it's broken down in terms of total cost, yearly cost, and then the last page actually gives you a summary of what the budget's going to be. How much for personnel, fringe benefits. They increased our travel to $10,000 a year versus $7,000 last year. Your responsibility is still 21.3%. The federal government, through Louisiana Rehab Services, will pay 78.7% of this budget. It's not any different from what we did last year. It's just extended over 3 years, and it has included a step raise, just like we do for teachers, for our transition specialists. So I'm just asking that you review it and give us permission to continue doing this. We're going to expand the services to students, from students with IEPs to even students with 504 plans. So we'll have even more students involved in the transition programming. And you remember they are entitled to 240 hours of paid employment. So that's where we are with this grant.
Mrs. Bennett, were there any refinements from the original contract that changed in this contract? Have you found ways to become better and become smarter?
Well, I think in that we're expanding it to students with 504 plans rather than just students with disabilities. I think that's a real positive because there'll be many more students. Because we expanded it to 504 students, Louisiana Rehab has certified more students for us than they did last year. They've told us we can have as many as 45 students employed this year, which is a little more than, well, we had 30-something last year, but we're up to 45 now that can actually have gainful employment.
That's good. That's good, thank you for that.
Yes?
Thank you. Item number 8, we're gonna table that one until next, month. When, Mr. Washington, looks into that. Item number 9, that's is deferred to Thursday night. Item number 10, consider approving contract for facility usage at Northwestern State University.
So this is a contract that we've had for a while with NSU, and we deal with Mr. Burke over there. And what they've had to do is, I think the previous contract was for 2 years. That 2 years is now up, and so we only pay them to defer their costs. So if they have to, if it costs them $500 to have the lights on that night, then we pay them that. They calculate those costs based on our usage in historical years, based on our usage of the football field. I think we also use Prather Coliseum for the basketball tournament, and some other items. And then they also added on the very last page some COVID-19 related additional costs, because for them to allow us to utilize it on a Friday and then perhaps St. Mary's on a Saturday or NSU on a Saturday, there has to be additional cleaning that's COVID-19 related. Me and Mr. Walscombe have both gone through this contract. It's pretty boilerplate, but it also, again, NSU is not making money off of this. This is simply for them to cover their costs associated with us using their facilities. And I've had 2 or 3 conversations with Mr. Burke, and I feel very comfortable with it, and it allows Natchitoches Central to utilize their facilities for football. It also allows for our graduations at the end of the year as well for our other folks. So.
And the amount's in the budget.
Correct, yeah.
How does the amount compare to what it was 2 years ago, do you know?
It's basically, I'd have to pull, I can pull that for you for Thursday. It's not gone up substantially. It's gone up basically due to their increased cost, but I can get you an exact breakdown of that. I can email that to y'all tomorrow, and we can have you that added to the packet for Thursday.
Probably most of those increases are sanitation.
Most of them are sanitation, which again, the back page updates that, but they also, there's some issues with, for instance, they have a cleaning contract for their folks. Their cleaning contract increased. Well, now if they have to have 2 people to clean up after our football game, and their contract increased, then we're paying the difference in that regard. So not huge increases, but increases, and I can again get you all the specifics on those.
So the cleaning amount is already included in that usage fee?
No, there's an additional cleaning, and the reason it's additional is it's contextual to if anyone's utilizing it the next day. If no one's utilizing it the next day, we don't have those additional costs. And so it really is based on, there's some flexibility in their schedule. You know, right now they may say, oh, no one's using the stadium the next day, but then they may have, I don't know, the tennis coach say, well, we're gonna run bleachers. If the tennis coach is gonna run bleachers, then they have to disinfect prior to, based on the 24 hours or 48 hours with COVID. So that's why it's kind of, it's just an addendum, and it's an additional cost.
Mostly due to the COVID.
Mostly due to COVID, but some of it is due to the fact that if their contract changed with their facility folks, then they had to, you know, as they said, they want to be good partners, but they can't take a loss on it either, so.
Mr. Eloy, let's talk a little bit about the band was doing the concession stand. Is that something that's going to continue?
So I spoke to Mr. Gordy and Mr. Himes about safely being able to do concessions, and they both have, I believe, implemented programs to do concessions. Concessions are not going to be the same, but there will be some form of concessions. As far as who is running those concessions and who is getting the funds from that, I would have to defer to those principals, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not aware of what program is getting those currently, but I'm assuming they would be able to answer that for you.
Well, we know Lakeview plays at Lakeview Stadium.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about with the facility usage issue. So will the band be utilizing their concessions to?
The band parent boosters have historically served the concessions, and they have NSU has a contract with Sodexo.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a change? Will there be a change with this agreement?
We get permission from them. I've gotten an okay for us to use that concession stand this year. They've worked with us really good, and the band will continue to use that as their main fundraiser. And we appreciate them letting us use it. And this is really the main fundraiser for the band to get them through the year.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Gordon, because again, they have that contract with Sodexo, and that could be a stumbling block. Thank you for that information.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. That did not get addressed or changed in this document.
I didn't see it. I saw other facility use.
I thought you were referencing COVID-related policies in regards to concessions.
I think it mentioned it somewhere in there.
I'll look at it.
Well, no, I think it did. Any other questions? Number 11, consider granting permission for Mr. Perry Watson School Board of Architects to look at the roof on office building and the ceiling damage at Gold Island Elementary Junior High School. That was Mr. Garner, but I think,
Yeah,
Mr. Harris, you.
yeah, he just wanted to make sure, as we capitulate to item number 6, that we would be able, once we approve our millage that we increased, that we would get on this particular item, that it'll be prepared for going out for bid anywhere between January and February. You know, and I think he's discussed it with Mr. Wascom and the principal there. And I think we have a technicality on number 6, the reason it hadn't been done.
Item number 12.
Quick question real quick,
Uh-huh.
back to number 11. So if we get that repaired, can we get insurance for Gold Island? Can they have their property coverage? Or do you know why we have just liability on that Gold Island building?
No, I'm sorry, it's
No.
Clutcheville. If I say Goldana, I'm sorry, it's Clutcheville.
No, he said Clutchville.
Clutcheville.
You said Gold Island.
Okay, Clutcheville is liability only because it's been abandoned.
Okay.
I'm
so-
sorry if I misspoke.
Okay, so Gold Island does have.
It does have insurance, yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Garner's concern was if we go it alone, something happens, then we may have an issue.
Right.
So he really wanted someone to look at
Right.
structural integrity of this situation.
And you might have already looked at it. I don't know.
Yeah, I've actually got that on my list, so then I can lower my number by that.
And item number 12, consider approving installation of sidewalks from the parking lot to the ball field and from the ball field to the main building at Fairview Elementary Junior High School.
Yes, and Ms. Williams is here. It was on our alternative bid, and so we just wanted him to come back and look at it so that we could go ahead and begin to get it done. I've also contacted Refuge Foundation, and I'd like to get with Ms. Williams and Mr. Wascom and Ms. Hicks, so that we can possibly get some money through the Refuge Foundation that to Healthy Fitness Initiative. That's $25,000. So. So we want to go ahead and get that done because they really need it, and we want to see it done.
And that concludes finance. Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mrs. Page.
Well, we've covered everything tonight, every category. Okay. Look at your sheets. Don't if you have any questions. Thank every employee you see.
So F on 4F was on there last month. Yeah. And I was going to abstain last month, but I missed the meeting, so. I didn't know, are some of the others repeats too, or was that just a typo that it's on there again?
Don't know, I didn't, she wasn't a teacher
So she changed.
last.
Get a little closer. We can't hear you over here.
Okay,
Thank you.
can you hear me?
She
Ms.
was
Page?
a non-certified teacher before,
Okay.
I don't know if it was like that or not, but that is what happened. She was a non-certified teacher, now she's a teacher.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a repeat.
It could be, it could be.
Well, it might be that she's on here as a virtual teacher, and it probably changed. I'm not sure.
She was virtual from the beginning.
She was virtual from the beginning.
We'll check it out.
Because the effective dollars can afford to reconsider.
Well, Mrs. Page, thank you for your dedication to filling all these slots. I saw the website again today, of asking people to come join our team. And as Superintendent Eloy has anointed you or appointed you our Covet czar.
Yeah.
It's a great job you're doing there.
Thank you. But it's everybody, I mean, in spite of, because I don't want to start preaching, I'm not a preacher. But in spite of all that's going on, we have some frustrated people, we have some dissatisfied people, we have some disappointed people, but we have the greatest bunch because we have some hard-working people. So when we have our little meltdowns, and we all have, we get right back up and start working again. So I mean that when I say it, when you see our employees, please say thank you. Please say thank you, because we're working harder than we've ever worked. I think some people under they're, I don't know, they've made the mistake of thinking that we were out and not working, and it is easier. Has it been easier? No. No. But we do this because we love what we do, so thank you.
Ms. Page, are we running into a shortage in, with virtual or in school because of, much of a shortage because of the situation overall with COVID?
Not more than usual, and I know
No more
that
than
sounds
usual.
crazy. We've been in a shortage for the last 10 years, and not more than usual, actually. In fact, we may be doing better. We still have a shortage though.
See Ms. Page, sign up today. All right. Thank you, Ms. Page. Mr. Harris.
All right.
Report, sir.
Item number one, consider approving naming of the NCHS football field, the J.D. Garrett football field. Mr. Gordon.
Good evening, good to see y'all. Not that my voice wouldn't be muffled with that, but, I think this is a good opportunity for me to fill everybody in on what's going on out at Natchez Central. We're getting a much needed upgrade to our athletic facilities. We're getting a football field that will have bleachers. It's the same field, but we're gonna have bleachers that hold 1,000 fans with a press box. And it's gonna look like a football field as opposed to looking like somebody's practice field. So this is a big improvement. We won't be able to play basketball there because 1,000 seats, 5A can't play in a little stadium that size. But we will have soccer there, freshman football games, JV games, and that field's utilized a great deal. And these bleachers can maybe be a start to someday us actually playing ball right there. But that's a big expense to go that route. We're talking several $1 million. But we think that this football field should be named after someone who was instrumental in the development of football in Natchez. And J.D. Garrett. Many of us know J.D. Garrett. Many of us have been around him. Those of you who don't know him, he pretty much taught most of the town how to swim, as well as he was a football coach at Natchez Central for many, many, many years. I could probably say a couple of decades, over a couple of decades. And he's been instrumental in the glory years of the 90s. J.D. Garrett was heavily responsible for that. And we'd like to name the field after him. Would you like me to go ahead and cover the next one too?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Consider approving the naming of the NCHS Field House, the Eugene Christmas Field House.
Okay, so in addition to this football field, that we're the stands and the bleachers and the press box that we're going to have, there'll also be a little concession stand with restrooms, which is much needed there. So we'll work our way back towards the softball field, and we're going to see that there's a big hole in the ground right now where our field house would be. And the field house is very important in athletics. The road to a state championship begins in the field house. And a lot of things happen in that field house. It's a dressing room. It's a place where this one is going to have a weight room, a state-of-the-art weight facility. We're going to have some classrooms where we can actually have players go in and view films. If any of y'all have seen what all's going on now with films, those of us that are old enough to have played football back in that other century and used to watch reel-to-reel films, well now they have a huddle and it's all digital and the players can go home and look at it at home. It's amazing. But the most important part of any field house is the training room. You can't produce a football team without having a good training staff, without the players being able to play. It's a rough sport. Any given time, you can have 5, 10, $15 out of 60 players that need attention in that training room. And for many years in the 80s and 90s, Eugene Christmas was a trainer for Northwestern. And he would come over twice a week to Natchitoches Central to work on our players. And he's the kind of guy, any of you that knew him, I happened to have met him in 1973 when I started at Northwestern, that he was well respected all over the South, all over his conference. But on the side, though, he would come over and he would help us out. I'm going to tell one story by one of my assistant principals was a football coach in the 90s, and that one of our star players got a leg injury during the game, and the doctor on the sideline said, "Oh, well, we'll have to operate on that in the morning." And so have him up at the hospital, and there's something wrong with his knee, ACL, MCL, everything that you could think of. Major injury. Well, Saturday morning, some people call him Dr. Chris. Dr. Chris came over, looked at him, and said, "Who said he needed surgery?" And I may get the medical term wrong, but Mr. Chris noticed that he had, I think it's elegant sliders or some kind of sliders where both knees had an extra bone, both legs had an extra bone below the knee. And that doctor had misdiagnosed this guy's kneecap was all out of place. And so Dr. Griffin said, "Oh, he's all right, he can play Friday night." So this is the kind of guy he was and the contribution that he had. We'd like to name the field house after Eugene Christmas.
Mr. Gore, he started that in the 70s.
Yeah, well,
I worked for him.
I know in 73, my roommate was
When he walked into the room, people, they listened.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, all of us that know him know that he had a physical disability along with his he walked with a limp and one arm would be kind of like that, but he was a tremendous trainer. So we would definitely like to, one, have the football field named after J.D. Garrett, and two, have the field house named after Eugene Christmas.
They did that all that for free, too.
Oh, yes.
All that
he
for
was,
free.
he was doing that on his own.
Is it just going to involve some kind of placard only, or, I mean, what kind of?
Well, there would be a placard on the building for the field house, and then the press box would have in large letters J.D. Garrett Field. Oh, this will be a big nose thing, and they've asked us for the colors, and it's gonna be nice, I promise you. I'm excited. And a lot of our athletes are excited too, football coaches, and it's
Be a lot of
just
former-
amazing what we're getting done over there.
Should be a lot of former players and things too excited.
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Jay, Garrett, come on.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
All right, thank y'all.
Okay, item 3, consider approving pupil progression plan update. Mr. York?
Okay, pupil progression, it's that time of the year, I think we have to get this into, our pupil progression plan into the state later this month. And so there's 3 additions to the plan from 2019-2020. I'd refer you to page 25 first. In that respect, we are increasing dual enrollment opportunities to 9 hours for students at the high school level. This is part of the journey to getting the associate's degree. I'll be honest with you, probably next year we'll be upping this again because the whole idea is students have to take a certain amount of hours in order to get the associate's degree, so we have to keep improving that. So that's on page 25. On page 22, that is your virtual attendance and grading policy. And basically what that's saying is what we're proposing, and this is in line with what many other districts are proposing, is that students who are in one of 3 categories by the 6th week of the 9-week grading period, and those 3 categories are multiple failing grades. The other category would be just lack of participation. We have several students who are in virtual who have not logged on once. And then the third would be that they are not communicating with their teachers. If they are doing one of those 3 things, it will be communicated to them and their parents that they are on academic probation, with the idea being that they can easily exit the academic probation if they show marked improvement. At the end of that 3-week period, which would be the end of the 9-week period, if they have not shown marked improvement, they are still failing multiple classes, they are still not communicating, they are still not engaging at all in the lessons, then they would lose the privilege of being in virtual school and would have to exit into face-to-face. What we looked at is we looked at every other district with this. Many of them are taking a harder line than we are. We recognize that people have made this decision out of deep consultation with their family, and we want to give them a warning before we just pull the rug out from under them. Now, I would also say that to me it's, if your child is not doing anything in virtual school, you should have been aware of that. But we still want to give them that 3-week grace period to understand the repercussions of what will happen. And hopefully they'll turn around and can be successful, but if not, we would pull them from virtual. And then the third item, page 22, the face-to-face grading policy. Probably need to give that a little extra discussion. There has been an issue in the district prior to of, and this, it opens a can of worms to some extent, but whether to give students zeros. Many of us, when we were in school, there was no question. You got a 0 if you earned a 0, if you didn't do any work. The reason behind some folks considering not giving zeros is not because we want to have students who get something they don't deserve, but it's the mathematical nature of an F. If you look at a B, that's a 92 to an 85. That's a 7-point scale. Same is true for all of the grades except for an F. So a student could potentially get a 66, they have an F, you can recover from that. But if they get a 6 or a 0, mathematically that is much more difficult to recover from. That being said, we recognize the idea of giving students any score, whether it be a 50 or anything above a 0 for work not earned, is a difficult prospect for many people to accept and understand. So what we've determined is what we would actually like to do is something that we think kind of meets in the middle. Students who do not complete a test or any sort of assignment will be assigned an I. And this actually comes from, we were talking with the curriculum team and Mr. LeBron, there's an excellent study out there called The Power of the I. And what that does is, instead of a student become overwhelmed with having all these zeros, you give them an incomplete. So you're not failing, you're just incomplete. What they can do is they have until the 9 weeks to complete that work. If at the end of the 9 weeks, assuming there's not some extenuating circumstances, they still have that I, then it resorts to the 0. Now, the other part of this is, if a student receives a score anywhere below a 75, because we do know students can genuinely earn, they can take the test and they could receive a 0 just because they get every answer wrong, or they could get a 20, or something that's not beneficial to them. What we want to do is put into pupil progression policy is that they would be able to reteach, retest. Because what we're really talking about here is there's a misunderstanding of what grades are. Grades should be able to tell me, if I'm the teacher in the classroom, exactly where a student's understanding is. They should not be punitive. They should not just be subjective and be able to say, hey, I brought something in the class, some Kleenex for the teacher, their supply closet, I can get bonus points. It should truly be where they're at. So the idea of reteach, retest, if a student does poorly on a test, they could be retaught, retested, and then improve their situation so that it's not punitive. The other part of this is if they take the same test, we would average the first test with the next test to get the new score because it's the same test, but they would also have to provide justification of their answers. So perhaps it's a A-B thing and they're connected vocabulary, so it's not just saying, oh yeah, I should have answered B, it's I should have answered B, and then they put the justification of the reason they answer is this, is da 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 da, which gives it more credibility. If they take a new test, a version they haven't seen, then they are able to take the highest score of the new test. And that's because they haven't been exposed to the information, so we want to give them that benefit. And we also want to realize that the reason we're given 2 options there is because in some cases a teacher is not able to produce a new test, and but we also don't want to penalize the student, but we also want to recognize that teachers have a heavy workload, especially this year. So again, I feel like this, I think we talked for days and hours within those days over this because it is it's a hot button. And we wanted to not overburden teachers, but also we wanted to give students a chance to improve their situation. And again, it's changing this mindset that grades are not punitive, grades are not competitive, grades are should be a simple reflection of where a student currently is. And if that means that they took a test the first week of a 9 weeks and made a 0, but then later on they're at a 90. Well, really, the reflection should be closer to that 90 because now they've changed, they've improved. So that's the thinking with that. I would highly recommend that you read these policies closely because I'm not insulting anyone's intelligence by reading them directly to you. I'm just kind of summarizing our thinking with them. But if you have any questions, I'd love to get those questions before Thursday. So if we need to make any addendums or amendments to these things, we can do so. But any questions on those matters?
Let's go to page 5.
Okay.
Students who transfer in from Covet.
So, sorry. The reason I believe that is, and Ms. Horn, if you can speak directly to that, I believe that's due to the COVID-19. They suspended that rule, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was in the state template, yeah.
Yeah, so basically what they're saying is we didn't have the data this year to be able to give that home study test, and so for that 1 year, they're not doing that placement test.
But this is new, it's an addition.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's based on the state template that was already approved by Bessie.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Horn. Yes, ma'am.
In reference to the minimum grades, the discussion of supervisors, meeting that possibility of the grades being delayed because of children readjusting because they've been out for 6 months and coming into new grades. And it's more difficult, especially for the virtual students. I'm dealing with it firsthand. I I can tell you've already had it.
God bless you.
Well, yes, every day is a blessing, it's different. Or will the minimum wage be postponed to allow the children to have the opportunity to, make the adjustment and possibly improve their
So,
grades?
interim grades are not, they don't stick with a student. So we did actually delay interim grades by, I believe, about a week from our original, and that was largely due to some issues with having to change some scheduling issues in J campus. So it was delayed, but we have, I can tell you this, I've talked to pretty much every principal on this matter, and what they've told me is and I'll relay a conversation I had with Ms. French. They have looked at every student's grades and they've evaluated the fact that they do, and I think this is school to school, they have more Fs this year, and we can blame it on virtual, or we can blame it on just COVID and the Hurricane Laura and all those things. So the principals are very aware, the teachers are very aware at every school where their students are with Fs, and I think I've had discussions with at least 3 or 4 where, and we discussed this also in our principal meeting last week, where before we assign those Fs, before we just say, oh yeah, they have an F, there's that power of I. We have the ability in these situations to put an I in place where it says, hey, yeah, you haven't completed that. And I can tell you, I'm on some of the virtual classrooms, specifically at the high school. I'm connected to the U.S. history class, so I get all the emails that come through it. And I've kept that because it kind of gives me a microcosm of virtual in general. And what you're seeing is you are seeing a lot of kids who are turning things in late, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because what it goes back to is it goes back to the idea that we wanted to give teachers, especially in the virtual setting, flexibility to realize that this is something new to everybody. And so if you receive something late and you're able to put that in a typical year, sometimes we say, oh, no, it's late, you're not going to get credit. But I think in this year, I've seen principals and teachers given a lot more of that grace. And I also think the principals are just very acutely aware of the fact that we don't need to. You have a kid you've had them from kindergarten through 3rd grade, and all of a sudden they've always been an AB student, and then you see their CD student. There needs to be a conversation occur before that gets them labeled. And we've had those conversations a lot with the folks, and I think all the principals are on the same page. Now, at some point, at the end of the 9 weeks, are there going to be some students who we've done everything we can, we've made the calls, we've given them grace, we've encouraged, all those things, and they still get in that place? I think we are going to have those issues, but I am confident that our principals have done everything in their power, more so than any other year, to ensure that as much as out there as possible to help these folks. And I think the big thing is going to be telling these kids that, telling these parents that if their student is going to be in academic probation for virtual, assuming pupil progression passes, I think that's going to be kind of a light bulb for a lot of folks that either A, virtual is not working for me, or B, I need to be more involved in virtual with my student, or I just in general need to encourage my student. I think it's going to light a fire for some folks, because virtual, it's a struggle. I've talked to many parents, my own family included, and a lot of people are just struggling with it. It's more of a workload than I think some folks expected.
It really